Beauty is nothing but the beginning of terror which we are still just able to endure. I'm talking about a toilet, by the way. This is Colt and Lilia, two kids that have grown up in a post-apocalyptic world ravaged by the living dead. One day after the church brutally slaughters a family that they had just saved to refuse to give up their son, Lilia realizes just how corrupt they are and asks Colt to escape with her. However, Colt refuses. You see, Lilia and Colt have a very special relationship, having been taken away from their families at a very early age. He was all she had and she was everything to him. However, Lilia's powers are temporary, meaning that the church will be releasing her soon, and unlike Colt, she still has a family to go back to, knowing that if they did run away, they'd be hunted down for the rest of their lives. But more than anything, that she'd be happier without somebody as broken as him. Colt is quirky, goofy, and kind of a weirdo to be honest, but underneath all that, he harbors a deep self-hatred. His father abused him as a child and murdered his mother before his eyes, denying that Colt was even his son until Colt stabbed him in the heart, and only then did the man see himself in the boy. Colt refuses to become someone like him, to call something love whilst destroying it, and so after leaving Lilia behind, he goes alone on his biggest mission yet, to secure a living dead partner, a creature that aids you as a necromancer, only to be heavily wounded and put on death's door. I have to protect Lilia. And just as he thinks it's the end, Lilia comes back to save him, shouting at him for trying to get himself killed. More impactful than that, however, is what Colt says, how he wants to protect her from his insanity, the evil that runs in his blood, and Lilia just says that she doesn't care. She knows the horror ahead, the church, the violence, but says that as long as she has Colt by her side, she'll be okay. And honestly, even though it's just a one-shot, to see a child overcome his trauma and learn to love is, it's really heartwarming. Colt agrees, mercilessly ending her life, choosing to resurrect her as his undead companion. Now, she roams the world as a cursed being, shunned and feared by the very people she once protected, all whilst believing she died in battle and was saved by Colt, clinging to gratitude and never realizing the truth. The story closes on a haunting note. We'll be together forever. What you're looking at is a one-shot called Dear My Living Dead that was made by Ida Era 1 year prior to the release of their main series, Toilet Bound Hanako, and it is, how do I say this, fucking bizarre. After reading it, you don't really know how you're meant to feel. Should you be happy or sad? Was this a bad ending since she was killed, or a good ending since they end up together? I still don't know. But that being said, I think it's this one shot that gives you a good insight into just what type of artists they are. And yes, artists, not artist. Ida Era is made up of two people, Ida the artist and Ida the writer. I've read a lot of their works by now, from lost visual novels to one-shots, just full-on manga, and if I had to use one word to describe all of them, it would be deceiving. They all start off with these beautiful, cute characters and worlds, but there's always this sinister, darker tone standing right behind you, and it's genuinely terrifying. The strongest example of that feeling is without a doubt Toilet Bound Hanako-kun, and that is why it is a damn shame that nobody seems to fucking think that when they see the title. A lot of people seem to have this misconception as to what Toilet Bound Hanako actually is when first coming across it, and I don't exactly blame them. I blame that word, that one fucking word, toilet. You would be baffled at how many people get turned off by the word toilet, which is bullshit because one, that's not even the right translation. The accurate one would be Earthbound Hanako-kun, which is probably a lot better, even though I'm weirdly fond of the title Toilet Bound Hanako at this point. And two, it's based on a popular myth in Japan, pretty much their version of Bloody Mary, an urban legend about the ghost of a young girl who died in World War II that haunts school bathrooms. So I imagine a person that knows this would take the title a lot more seriously. Although it definitely has a lot of lightheartedness and comedy in it, if you've read this series, you would know that it can be just as, if not even darker than Dear My Living Dead. And I say that not to be like, the series is dark and edgy, you should check it out, but to highlight what this series tries to explore and the grandness of it. Straight up, Toilet Bound Hanako is one of my favorite stories ever. I came across the series 5 years ago when I was 16 at the height of its popularity with the anime, and the manga blew me away then and has kept blowing me away since. However, 5 years of no season 2 due to the team struggling to get funding for it has led to a huge dip in its popularity. And although it still has a strong, loyal, hilariously weird fan base, coming across comments of people being surprised that season 2 is airing like 6 episodes in is a damn shame, because this series has become so much more than it was back then. And if I do my job right today, by the end of this video, you'll understand why I think it's so amazing. Also, this is probably the best time to say this. I made this video with two audiences in mind. People that have read the manga / are just fans of the series, and people who have never read or watched it. And so I've split this video into two sections. If you're a Toilet Bound Hanako fan, this entire video is for you. But if not, don't worry. The first half will only have very minor spoilers that I promise will not take away from your overall experience. And I will give you a clear big fat spoiler warning around midway through. One last thing, if you are interested in supporting the channel, then checking out the Patreon helps so much. These videos take hundreds of hours to make, and I love it, but it's also really hard. But if not, don't worry, I love you regardless. And so with that out of the way, to do any of this, we need to first start with what stands out about Toilet Bound Hanako the most, because trust me, there is something hidden within that, and it is interesting. Toilet Bound Hanako-kun follows the story of Nene Yashiro, a plucky high school student at Kimono Academy, a school shrouded in mysteries and home to the Seven Wonders, powerful apparitions that govern the fragile boundaries between life and death, the leader of which is the legendary ghost and number 7 of the school wonders, Hanako of the Toilet, a spirit rumored to grant wishes to the living. He is also a boy in comparison to the real life myth, and very, very silly to say the least. Nene, on the other hand, is a completely normal girl. For the most part, she struggles with her love life, constantly being rejected for her absurdly gigantic, colossal, daikon-looking legs. She's also my favorite character in the series, and so she seeks a wish that will get her a boyfriend, leading her to the Hanako-kun, who grants her a wish by giving her a self-help book. Look, after a lot of shenanigans, turns out Hanako can't really grant wishes like a typical genie anyways, but at the very least, he's able to find the root of the problem. It's not that Nene wants a boyfriend, she just wants to feel loved, and in trying to fill that emptiness, she ends up making a really stupid decision that turns her into a fish, and so has to use her one wish to get Hanako to save her, and it's here where we get introduced to one of the most important themes in the story. Every wish comes with a price, a consequence, and so she has to live the rest of her life avoiding water in front of others, or else she turns into a fish, and also becomes Hanako's assistant, which honestly might be the worst of the two. And so alongside Ko, a hot-headed, happy-go-lucky exorcist, Nene is pulled deeper and deeper into the world of the Seven Mysteries, where the boundaries between life and death blur, unraveling the secrets behind them, but above all else, she inches closer and closer to finding the darkest truth of them all. Who exactly is Hanako? Now, the first thing you probably notice if you've heard about this series or just the summary alone is the art style. Toilet Bound Hanako has this almost storybook feel to it, like something that's come straight out of a child's dream. Characters are drawn with these chibi-like proportions, and a mixture of these thick and thin outlines give them this cartoonish feel. However, whilst most chibi art is characterized by its simplistic designs, this is the complete opposite. Everything about the characters are drawn with an insane amount of attention to detail. Going back to Dear My Living Dead, for example, Ida says that even though the designs were simple, they would spend up to 5 hours adjusting Colt's face for just a single panel, and you can absolutely feel that in almost every page of Toilet Bound Hanako. Take just the eyes, for example. Characters all have eyes that are drawn differently based on their personality and how they maneuver in the story. Nene is defined by her ability to constantly move forward and to reach out to people, and so her eyes constantly reflect what's right in front of her. Ko, on the other hand, is constantly torn between his duty as an exorcist and his deep empathy for apparitions, and so his eyes always seem to be on the verge of tears. And that is just one of the many things that Ida uses to give each character a story through just their design. However, by far my favorite thing about their character designs is how they choose to draw light on the characters. Instead of strictly following a natural light source, Ida applies highlights and shadows selectively, in their own words, just to produce the effect, not the actual light source. Hanako's black hair and uniform, for example, are never filled with pure black. Instead, they feature these delicate strokes and gradients, and what this does is it creates a certain delicate and fragile feel to the characters. Don't believe me? Look at this panel of Hanako before I colored in all the light, and after. See what I'm saying? See what I'm saying? The contrast between light and dark sets the mood, soft lighting for tender moments and sharp shadows for the eerie ones. Add all this up and what you end up with is characters' facial expressions that are just so full of emotions in a unique way that you will not find anywhere else. But even then, it's so much more than just how the characters look, it's the very world they reside in. Toilet Bound Hanako's world is gorgeous. It is like walking through a water painting, and the use of broad strokes and the pastel colours in the coloured pages expands on that feeling even further. Take this boundary, which I'm not going to give you the context of, but looking at it is enough to convey what I mean. The bold outlines, flat colours, and texture shading resemble classical picture books. Even the glossary pages of each volume have their own intricate designs to further convey that specific feeling, which I don't know if that's just me, kind of insane. All in all, the art in Toilet Bound Hanako feels timeless, like a beautifully aged folktale. And you would think the intention of this is to try and whisk us away into a world of escape, into a distant and beautiful dream, but it is quite the opposite. I think Ida wants to break that feeling, to be quite frank, fucking traumatize you, rattle the very fibers of your being, and bring you back down to reality. For example, In chapter 4 of the manga, we come across the second of the school mysteries, the Misaki stairs. If someone steps on the 4th step, they will be dragged to the world of the dead and their body will be torn into 1,000 pieces. And after Aoi, Nene's best friend, seem to have disappeared from existence, the toilet trio, yes, that's what they're called, go to investigate by entering number 2's boundary. And like I said, it's this beautiful, majestic, dreamlike place, like something straight out of a Ghibli movie, which is governed by Yako, the second of the 7 mysteries herself, who at first glance seems like a typical antagonist, elegant, mysterious, and beautiful. Given the group a simple task, gather the scattered pieces of a body to help her rebuild somebody called Misaki. Pretty straightforward, right? But, as expected from a group called the Toilet Trio, things don't go smoothly and it's really funny. However, there's this moment where the story just has this very sudden shift in tone, the kind that makes your stomach turn. After Nene finds her friend Aoi turned into a lifeless puppet, she gets tasked with finding and destroying Yako's Yoshiro, an object that has personal value to them that gives them their powers, eventually coming across her diary which reveals the truth about who she is. Yako is a fox spirit who spent her days unnoticed and all alone until Misaki, a kind-hearted teacher, came into her life and began looking after her. She grew attached to him, speaking fondly of just how seeing him every day filled her with so much joy, even finding comfort in the times that he told her off. To her, he was everything. She loved him. But one day he just stopped coming to school. Yako later finding out that Misaki had died falling down the stairs. It's by far not the most brutal thing in the story, nor the darkest, but I think it summarizes what this story is about, and more importantly, what it's trying to make you feel. Yako is a fox spirit. In Japanese folklore, they're often portrayed as tricksters, beings capable of shape-shifting illusions and blurring the lines between reality and fantasy. So to take a being known for that and to make her the heart of a story about the inability to accept death, it shows that even tricksters, even the ones who live in lies and magic, aren't immune to grief. That for all their power, they still long for something they can't bring back. Yako's story isn't about deception, it's about denial. The question, I wonder what it means to die, the coping mechanism of building a replacement for another Misaki, are all just desperate refusal to accept the absence of someone she loved. Her illusion isn't a trick, it's a coping mechanism. This subversion of the storybook feeling compels us to humanize the spirits and see them not just as supernatural beings but as individuals burdened by unresolved emotions. The series uses that contrast to reinforce a central important theme. While the supernatural may offer a dreamlike escape, death itself is always tragic and something we all have to confront. Looking from the outside, it's easy to see the story as a fun little ghost tale, but it's these moments that become more and more prominent throughout that remind us that this isn't a story about escape, but about facing reality, the truth of what we go through and the inevitability that comes with it. And all this leaves me with the question of why? Why is it so important that we need to face reality to the point that you create a dreamlike world just to crush it over and over again? And I think the answer to that question lies in Hanako himself. There is barely anything online about Adairo outside of just their Twitter and these events they do for their fans, which, side note, I fucking love. My favorite one is Hanako of the Opera, based on the musical The Phantom of the Opera, where you had to solve the puzzles to find out who was haunting the theatre. Each character has their own roles and storylines, which you can link back to the actual canon story, and it is insane how good the story is for just a Twitter event. 2 of them even got adapted in the after school anime. I'm sorry, I know, not related to the video, just had to get it off my chest. However, I did come across one interview they did in celebration of the anime getting a season 2 earlier this year, and there was one comment in particular that really stuck out to me. I have an appreciation for the old over the new. For example, back in the 1910s when commercial illustrations began to appear, they had these posters like of posing actors that I personally find really cool. Much of the furniture and clothing made back then I still find cute today. I also like how the people of the 1960s imagined the near future, what's called the retro future. And that's important because a huge part of Toilet Man Hanako's charisma lies in that retro nostalgic feel it has. But I've already waffled enough about Toilet Man Hanako's vibes. On a bigger scale, it works so well in showing how the characters are defined by the periods they're from. Through these characters, we are exploring the effects of not just emotional but physical stagnation, the inability to move forward and move beyond these periods they lived in. And that is the core of Hanako. Hanako is a lot of things. He's silly, childish, annoying, empathetic, and a tad bit evil. But if I had to use one word to describe him, it would be melancholic, because the more you find out about him, the more you feel this constant sadness that follows him. Even those fun moments eventually get tainted with oh, maybe this is all he's ever had. And yes, I think a big part of that is because we are looking at a person that has died, a child that was never able to grow up, but more than that, a person that has given up on himself, an outlier amongst the living, both in life and death. Yugi Amane, who Hanako was before, lived in the 1960s and eventually died in this era. He was a child that had a fascination with astrology, wanting to explore space and go to the moon. However, he is defined by the complete opposite of that. Somewhere along the way, those dreams disappeared, and before his life came to an end, he committed an unforgivable sin, murdering his own twin brother, the details of which we still don't know, but the weight of that act constantly lingers. Now, that is sad in and of itself. Killing your own twin brother, a child's death, it's really fucked up. But what makes this so tragic is in the context of the time period it's set in. The 1960s was a period of immense economic growth and optimism in Japan. This was a time where the country was recovering from the devastation of World War II and modernizing rapidly, entering a phase known as the economic miracle. In this era, dreams and aspirations were at an all-time high, especially for young people being raised on the idea that hard work and perseverance would lead to guaranteed success, and in Hanako's case, the possibility of reaching the stars, with the space race being in full swing at the time. Even then, this era is so much more important than people today realize. Even when it comes to manga itself, it laid the foundation for what shonen has become. Stories built on hope, drive, and the belief that anyone can reach their dreams. Characters like Goku, Luffy, and Naruto all carry the spirit of people raised in and around that period. And then we have Toilet Bound Hanako, which is a shonen by the way, that explores a character that goes against this idea, almost like a deconstruction of it. The story revolving around a kid who gave up on everything, a character directly contrasting the setting they're in, as well as on a meta level the magazine it's published in. That is why to me it is very important that people know Toilet Bound Hanako is a shonen, because it makes Hanako's struggle that much more impactful. That being said, I get why a lot of people assume otherwise. It falls into that weird genre of shonen like Pandora Hearts and Black Butler that feels like it's more targeted towards girls than it is to boys, and as someone that has spent a decent amount of time on my YouTube channel talking about and researching shoujo, I fucking love that, because that is by every means reflective of just how good the storytelling is. Shoujo is so much more than just romance, and I don't like assuming things are shoujo or have shoujo inspiration. Because of that, to the two people that watched the Down the Line video, I am sorry, but the fact remains that it has developed a way of emotional storytelling that you will barely find anywhere even beyond manga itself, from the use of panels to flow from page to page, to how the characters are drawn, etc. And a lot of it are things that Toilet Bound Hanako utilizes, even if it's in different ways, which most shonen don't. For example, the unique paneling that looks like frames gives you this feeling that you're stuck inside a painting, and with that also weirdly trapped, or the use of flowers, gradient, and tone to create these butterfly feelings in your stomach, or on the opposite end, utter dread, all while maintaining that rigid panel to panel feel that a typical shonen has. But that is still clearly different to shoujo. I think where that similarity comes from the most is the emotional storytelling. Iroh is so good at conveying a character's feelings through their interactions with the other characters. Just look at how much you could take away from just how they touch each other's hands. That being said, one of my favorite examples of this is how they make a very specific writing choice with Hanako compared to the other characters in the series. We never get any of his inner thoughts. What that means is, as readers, we're forced to look at all the subtle, more nuanced features of him, like what he wears, how he talks, etc., just like you would with a person in real life, humanizing him. And in the case of Yugi Amane, we see him through the perspective of Tsukamori. I can't fucking say his name, but I'm trying my best. He's an apparition that disguises himself as a teacher, and at one point in time was Amane's homeroom teacher when he was alive. Amane showed up to his classes constantly showing signs of physical abuse, but worse than that is all the suicidal tendencies he would show, constantly refusing any help, being okay with being hurt, and standing on a window with no fear of falling. But it's his relationship with Tsukamori's Yashiro that really gets to me. Amane claims to have a rock that fell from the moon. It's his most valuable possession, and it represents all of his dreams, wonder, and hope, and you can really see his genuine enthusiasm about it, constantly repeating how it's so amazing that a little rock traveled all the way from the moon, and he just gives it up, handing it over to Tsukamori, because in the end, he is not worthy of just a simple rock. He is not worthy of the basic human right to dream, becoming the only person that's ever been able to change the future written in one of his books, not becoming the science teacher he was originally meant to be. Why, how, or where, I won't be talking about until the second half of the video because that is a spoiler, but what makes this so impactful is how Amane's past, his abuse, neglect, and trauma are all woven into every aspect of his character, even after death. Hanako isn't just haunted by his past, he embodies it. He struggles to communicate his emotions, his awkwardness when it comes to his brother, the way he deflects with jokes and avoiding true vulnerability. Even without spoilers, it is clear that he can't forgive himself, and he teeters between two extremes, wanting to disappear entirely and yet still grasping onto the role and connections that he has left. He is by every means a walking contradiction. There is a beautiful example of this which the anime cut out, which is insane, where Teru is about to exercise Hanako. That is Ko's ghost racist older brother, by the way. On that note, I think this is the perfect time to talk about the anime situation. I really suggest checking out the manga over the anime. Season 1 cut out some really important character moments, as well as just not being able to convey the darker and more serious tone of the manga. But this is kind of complicated today because After School Toilet Bound Hanako and Season 2 have actually been really good and even adapted some of the missing parts, but I still think the manga is overall a more complete experience. But hey, you know, why not check out both? Take as much Toilet Bound Hanako as you can, because I really fucking love this series. In chapter 9 and 10, after Teru beats Hanako and threatens to kill him, Hanako lets out this desperate cry, saying, "Destroying me would only be a release. I still have things I need to do here." He wants to be loved but believes he doesn't deserve it. He wants to atone but refuses to let go of his guilt, and yet he still chooses to stay in the same position. And it's not just in Hanako's story, but in almost every character and work within Toilet Bound Hanako, this idea of clinging onto something, being unable to move on, and the painful struggle of letting go. Hanako isn't a ghost trapped in the school, he is a person trapped in his past, unable to move forward no matter how much he might want to. To answer the previous question, why is it so important to show us the brutal nature of death? I think it's to show us the dangers of not being able to deal with it. But as stupid as this might sound, death is so much more than just death. And it's that theme that can be seen in almost every single one of Ada Era's work, all the way back to her first one, Fox Masked Guardian Spirit. Fox Masked Guardian Spirit is barely even a one-shot. It's only 10 pages long and it looks more like a rough draft than a completed story, and yet it is still so interesting, especially knowing this came out way before Toilet Bound Hanako. The story revolves around a famous phrase in Japan, Nanatsu Made Wakami no Uchi, which translates roughly to, "Until the age of 7, children belong to the gods." It comes from a traditional Japanese belief where children under 7 were historically considered close to the spiritual world and therefore still under the protection or ownerships of the gods. This was most likely because of the high infant mortality rate in pre-modern Japan, leading to the belief that children were not fully part of the human world yet. Because of this, special care and rituals surrounded children until the age of 7. In this story, the child is a girl called Yuki, and just like the phrase is based on, every child have their own guardian spirit who, after doing their job, protecting them for 7 years, become a god. In this story, it's the fox masked boy, Saza, alongside an observer who is a cat, Shima. Honestly, they kind of have a weird / funny dynamic. He's been with her since the day she was born, with her teasing him constantly, but he's never actually spoken to her, and yet despite that, we know that Saza adores the girl, wanting nothing more than to bring her happiness. However, just as her final birthday with him comes up, he learns that she is destined to work in a brothel due to her wealthy parents' debt, and just like that, a brutal reality sets in for him. Crying and heartbroken by the cruelty of the world, he makes a decision to fail his duty and to let her take his place as a spirit, causing him to disappear. But there's a twist. At the end, it's revealed that the two characters have lived this cycle countless times, endlessly switching roles as guardian and child in a futile attempt to reach happiness. The cat commenting on how this will never change anything, having watched them repeat this cycle over and over for centuries. And once again, I'm left with that same contradictory feeling I got at the end of Dear My Living Dead, with the MC being unable to let go of the person they love, instead committing a sin to keep her by his side for what they believe to be the greater good. Is it happy because they're together? Is it sad that despite their devotion, they remain trapped, unable to break free from their predetermined fate, from their sins, dying over and over again, clinging to the faintest hope that this time will be different? It's more than the tragedy or brutality of death. These stories highlight the consequences of desires and the inevitable transformation that follows. The purpose of death in these stories is to focus on our relationship with others, and I get it, because what defines a relationship is that someday it will end, regardless of what type of relationship it is. And going back to Toilet Bound Hanako, the idea is the central conflict of every character in the series. One of my absolute favorite examples being Mitsuba, a student in Ko's class that passed away, a prime example of the cautionary tales present in this story. Mitsuba as a spirit holds on desperately to his lingering regrets and fears, unable to accept his death, whilst Ko suffers because he refuses to acknowledge the reality of Mitsuba's situation, and his desperate attempts to save Mitsuba, even if it's to try and help him, only bring him more suffering because some things are simply beyond his control. Iroh never fails to show that dichotomy between the beauty in their relationship and the ugliness that follows it. It serves as a warning that refusing to let go, no matter how much you care for someone, will have severe consequences. And all this leads me to a very clear and obvious question. What the actual fuck is the point of the story? Is it just this fun way of warning us to get our shit together and not to get attached to anything? If somebody dies, oh, sorry buddy, I gotta move on. And I don't think that's the case whatsoever. It is quite the opposite. There is something here we need to take away from Toilet Bound Hanako that can't be found in any of her previous works. The cautionary tales here only serve to make that something more profound, make that something actually change us. And what that something is can be found in the difference between the original pilot and the main serialization. Before actually getting greenlit, Toilet Bound Hanako was meant to be a short one-off series based on a story Iroh had given in as an assignment, now known as the pilot, which you can check out in Volume 0 alongside Dear My Living Dead. That being said, although it is very similar to the original first few chapters of the main series, it still, at its core, is a different story. One difference, for example, is that instead of Nene trying to wish for a boyfriend, she just wishes to straight up murder her ex. And I think I want to see more of that in the main series, or Ko being a lot more annoying, or the result of Hanako breaking the rules set out by God to stay away from humans causes these deep cuts on his arm. What I'm getting at here is the most clear difference between the two is the darker tone the pilot has. And that makes a lot of sense, since Iroh has said before that it was the darker parts of Toilet Bound Hanako that first manifested in their mind. Everything else came after, and you can feel that the most in its ending. In the last of the 3 chapters, Nene is given the abilities to see ghosts after wishing for it from Hanako, however it backfires with her overusing that power and facing the consequences of it, as well as the 7 wonders increasingly putting the pressure on Hanako to stay away from her as human relationships jeopardize their existence in this version of the story, and most of all, it disobeys God. All this leads to the last few pages where Hanako saves her one last time on the condition that she'll never get to see him again, but Nene begs him not to, saying, "I like you, Hanako. You're a good ghost." And you can see this pain and agony in his eyes, clearly not wanting this, and yet he reminds her that he is a horrible being before completely cutting off ties. The saddest part for me was this little scene of Nene crying at the bad rumors being spread about him afterwards, repeating once again that he's a good ghost. And maybe that's a small little message in itself that you can take away, that you can never really leave people's hearts. I don't know. It's a really sad, angsty ending, and it follows that same theme that I've been mentioning throughout, the consequences of our desires and relations with the dead. But there's still a clear difference between the pilot and the other 2 one-shots I've mentioned in this video. Instead, it feels almost like it acts as the other side of those stories. Hanako is faced with that same dilemma as Cole and Saza. Stay with somebody you love at the cost of their suffering, or to leave them, hoping that they'd eventually find happiness on their own. Hanako in this story chooses the latter, his solution to that tragedy being another tragedy. But the reason I even brought this up was to say that this is not what Toilet Bound Hanako is. I've spent most of this video trying to convince you that it's not just some goofy series with a toilet in the name and that it's way darker than it looks. Truthfully, it's not the darkness that hooked me. I actually don't like dark stories most of the time, except for that one. The beauty of Toilet Bound Hanako is that even in the darkest moments, the characters keep reaching out to each other, not out of desperation or obsession. The characters in the story choose to create connections without sacrifice, the story even criticizing it when we do see that. I think my favorite example is a bit of a weird one, but it has to be a fake confession scene. In chapter 8 of the main series, a misunderstanding takes place where Nene thinks that Hanako is about to confess his love to her, only to find out that he was using her to get the confession tree to reveal himself. And with Nene still craving a love that she can't give herself, ends up being genuinely heartbroken by this and starts to cry. And just as she's about to leave, there's this moment where Hanako apologizes, but it's much more than just an apology. He takes his hat off, and for the first time he just looks like a child. He just looks like a normal boy with this deep sadness on his face, holding her until she stops crying, and Nene sees this. It's the first time in the series we get a glimpse into who he really is, but more than that, unlike the pilot, unlike Dear My Living Dead, and unlike Fox Mask Guardian Spirit, Hanako opens up and lets himself be vulnerable, and it's this difference, this way of holding on, that separates this story from the others, and more than that, why it's so important, and it's where that fundamental idea goes and how it's depicted in this beautifully broken world. I think that's why you should check this series out. Now, if you are an anime only or haven't peeped this series, it has been a pleasure. The rest of this video will be dedicated to breaking down what the series has fucking become, where I think it's going, and most importantly, what I think you, the reader, can take away from it. And to do that, obviously, I will be going batshit crazy with spoilers. So once again, goodbye, and I hope after you finish watching, you come back with tears so Uncle Huss can carry you through it. That sounded a lot less creepy in my head, but I'm just going to swiftly move on. Okay, hello, I'm guessing you've read the manga, or you're just a psychopath. To put it simply, the manga right now is kind of fucking insane, and I'm not talking about the normal Toilet Bound Hanako insane we usually get. I'm talking the type of insane where you question what the fuck the point of this manga even was, and I will talk about it towards the end, but if you know, you fucking know. And that is also why now more than ever is the perfect time to make sense of this series, put all the puzzle pieces together, and what I think we should take away from it once again. And to understand any of that, I'd like to approach it in a bit of a different way than I usually would. I want to look at the extreme end of the series, or in another sense, the antithesis to the story's themes, the ultimate antagonist, because once you understand that, once you understand him, it becomes clearer and clearer what Ado Iro is trying to convey through this story. And of course, I am talking about none other than Yugi Tsukasa. Tsukasa is by far one of the most disturbing characters I've ever come across, purely in just how he makes me feel. His presence makes my skin crawl. He is a character that comes across as psychotic, obsessive, manipulative, and utterly lacking of any sort of empathy. And what makes him even more chilling is how all of this is reflected through Hanako's reaction to him, being horrified by his presence, while Tsukasa is full of pure joy. And it's this contrast between their reactions that perfectly captures the twisted nature of their relationship, and cements Tsukasa as a symbol of the series' most haunting themes. And it stays that way until the Red House arc, where everything we've ever known about him changes forever. After the severance, Nene and Ko are trying to find a connection with the boundary between worlds to reunite with Hanako, eventually coming across the Red House, which is not at all the scariest fucking house I've ever seen in any piece of fiction ever. Nope, it's just a normal house. And it also turns out to be the childhood home of Tsukasa and Hanako. And it's here in this house where we come across a child like Tsukasa living all alone and finally get an insight into the twins' backstory. At a very early age, Hanako came down with a severe illness, with the doctor even going as far as to say that he doesn't have much longer to live. This naturally led to him occupying all of his parents' attentions, leaving a very, very young Tsukasa all alone. But the thing that's kind of weird about this is that Tsukasa never felt any contempt or hatred about it. As a matter of fact, quite the opposite. He adores his brother and wants nothing more than for his health to improve. And so after coming across the Pit, as it's currently known as, a being living underneath the Red House that grants wishes, asks for Imani's condition to improve, and it does. However, as this story has constantly shoved down our throats time and time again, there is always a price to pay, sacrificing himself and being bound to the house forever, only to return half a year later as a completely different person, to the point that his mum goes to Exodus for help. And well, you know how the rest goes. Now, there is a lot to unpack here, but straight off the bat, I think what really stood out to me the most was the small nuances in Tsukasa's interactions. The lack of attention he gets, the lack of love, it's just kind of the norm for him. You also see it throughout the series, how everyone seems to just want to stay away from him, which I don't blame them for, but what's weird is that he always has that same reaction. Like, once again, it's just the norm. Just how things are. And despite that, there's still moments, small subtle moments, where you can see that he wants some sort of attention, some sort of love. How he asks Ko to take his hands, the frame where he holds his mother and her not reciprocating that love, and the final nail on the head is how Tsukasa stays in that house for decades until Ko tells him what happens. Only then does he decide to return, and this gives us the first real glimpse into what's really inside his heart, a desire to be loved. But with what we know about apparitions, that they become weaker and weaker until barely anything of their original self remain, it is not a stretch to say that the Tsukasa we know now is just a husk of the child we saw, with only his desire to be loved taken to the absolute extreme. And you can see that in this horrifying moment, being excited that there's something he doesn't know about Imani, even if it involves killing him. It is fucked up by every means, but knowing everything we do now, maybe he just sees this as a form of love since he's never known what actual love is. What I'm trying to get at here is that Tsukasa is not somebody who does not accept love, he is somebody that simply doesn't think it exists for him, that this is just the way things are, and therefore he doesn't understand what it is, seeing Hanako's hatred of him as some sort of affection. And that is an important difference, because it's that difference that shapes the twins' dynamic. Hanako is the other side of that coin. He does not accept love because he does not believe himself worthy of it, even if he knows it's there. And I adore how Ida Ero shows this through one of, actually maybe it'd be more accurate to say, two of my favorite characters in the series, Shijima, Mei, and the idea of fiction, or in another sense, dreams. To keep it simple, Picture Perfect revolves around the idea that reality and dreams cannot exist without one another. And at the heart of that is the two Shijima's relationship. Shijima Mei, a former student at Kimono Academy, suffered from a terminal illness and spent her days creating art, one day painting a tower with an idealized version of herself inside, embodying her hope to live on. However, after Mei's death, rumors falsely suggested that she had died by suicide because her parents rejected her art dreams. These rumors led to the legend Shijima of the art room, casting a shadow over her memory. Shijima, the supernatural entity born from Mei's painting, was angered by these false rumors, believing that preventing Mei from completing her final artwork would avert that misunderstanding and protect her memory. Shijima attempting to kill the Mei in the past. And what I love about all this is how it leads to one of my favourite moments in the manga, the moment where Shijima tells her that her existence isn't meaningless whatsoever. Even if fiction, even if our dreams don't go the way we want them to, it's the very fact that they exist that keep us alive. It is our hope. Without them, we'd never be able to go home, and that's why it's important that it exists alongside our reality right now. And seeing this is what spurs Nene on to do what's right in the face of death, and it's amazing. But it is also why Hanako's lines at the end of the arc hurt so much.
I'm sorry, Yashiro. I can't follow you to the moon. The me that made that wish has been dead for a long time. No use wasting it on a ghost. Besides, I've got work to do if I'm going to keep you alive. 90 years, huh? Big wish, but I'll grant it. You know I will.
If dreams are what keep us alive, then Hanako's refusal to dream is the ultimate declaration of death. To dream is to hope for something better, to live a life full of love. But Hanako still can't let himself believe in a world where he's allowed to be loved, shutting that door on himself completely. So whilst Nene walks forward with hope in her heart, Hanako stays behind, smiling but stuck, unable to believe he's worthy of the very thing that could set him free. And these are the two antagonists to the story's themes. Love beyond death exists, and more than that, you have to be able to accept it. And it's this idea that Toilet Bound Hanako challenges directly, that love isn't this one-dimensional thing that we think it is. And with that, I am now going to spend the following section justifying cannibalism. Yeah. Sacrifice of the Grim Reaper is, in my opinion, not just the best arc in the series, but just one of my favorite arcs ever. And I know it's technically 3 arcs, but I don't care. I count it all as one. The fucking gorgeous setting, the fights, the romance, the characters. Ah! It is like putting everything you love about the series into a bowl and then injecting it with steroids. However, even with all that being said, all the characters shining the brightest they ever have, the absolute highlight of this arc is Hakubo, aka the 6th School Wonder and the Grim Reaper himself. And it is really funny to think about how far we've come from just a toilet ghost. Hakubo basically says fuck you to that idea. He is the very manifestation of what it means not to be human. He is cold, ruthless, apathetic, and simply comes across as a being that holds no human emotion. And beyond that, a being not capable of loving. However, by now we know that this fundamentally can't be true because every school mystery has a Yorishiro, an object that is precious to them, even the Grim Reaper himself, something that they hold dear. And that Yorishiro is a human girl called Sumire, and she is probably even more fucked up than he is. Growing up as a Kanagi means that she had her agency taken away forever. She is nothing more than a sacrifice to the gods, a victim of, as Iroh puts it, self-serving old customs. And so she clutches onto whatever little agency she has, taking care of animals because their lives are in her hands, wanting people to agonize over her death, suffer in her memory, or in her own words, somebody to go to hell over her. And as extreme and toxic as these words are, I get it. If you couldn't choose your life, at the very least your absence will matter. You want to simply have some sort of effect on somebody. No, that's not right. An effect on somebody you love. It's a final act of agency, forcing the world to feel your impact, even if it never saw you before. And it brings up the question, what does it take to validate our existence? Does it matter what we leave behind, or more than that, how we're remembered? Can you ever die a good death? And what better person to answer that question than the Grim Reaper himself? Even if he's pretty, dull, it's made worse by the humans that take him in, only being able to follow instructions because that's all he's ever known, helping the villagers sacrifice girls to the god and throwing them down the pit, which definitely didn't lead to anything worse. However, Sumire is the only person that seems to have taken him out of that cycle. The love she has for him, the actions she takes, and the words she spews puts him in a position where he has to think for himself. He has to choose what to do for the first time in his life, and he chooses to keep relying on orders. Had she asked, had she cried to him, maybe he would have acted, but she never did. And because of that, she dies, leaving a lingering regret in his heart that, just like she wanted to, turned into a flame that devoured everything around him. There's a line from that one Ida Iro interview I mentioned earlier about Hakubo's character design, saying, "He has an invigorating face, like one that would belong to a member of a baseball club." And when I heard that, I didn't really get it because I couldn't see it. Probably because I'm a bit stupid and acoustic. He just felt like something that came straight out of a fairy tale. So fantastical and out of this world, and his personality added to the ideal. But it was only in chapter 89, on his deathbed, where I finally saw it. Just like Hanako in that confession scene, he looked like a child with this deep sadness in his heart. And the line, "I just felt that there was something I should have done." Man, what I'm trying to get at here is that these are two extremely messed up people. They are the result of their brutal upbringing and never being allowed to make their own decisions. And that just makes this a really volatile and toxic dynamic. Sumire basically being stuck in a never-ending hell, and Hakubo now trying to murder students. And yet, I can't help but feel attached to them, to root for them. And so when he eats her, somehow, some way, it makes me feel really satisfied. Getting to finally be honest, mending old regrets, and ending things on their own fucked up terms, a human and a demon. It's beautiful and broken, and it encapsulates what the essence of Toilet Bound Hanako is. Throughout the series, it constantly brings up the question of how. How do you have a relationship with other people when they are so fundamentally different to us? And the answer to that question is Sumire and Hakubo. What we can right now together. It doesn't change the fact that we all still yearn for something more than ourselves. And as long as we're honest, able to move forward and truly cherish one another, there is no reason to forego the person you love. And so, where does that leave the main couple in this series? Hanako and Nene. Hanako and Nene are one of my favorite ships in fiction, but there's kind of a huge difference between them and the other ones that I like. Want to guess what that difference is? You guessed it, just like Hakuba and Sumire, even though not to that extent, it is not a healthy relationship, like at all. For example, at the end of Picture Perfect, Nene asks Hanako to grant her a wish to live a full real life. And you know what? It's sweet, a bit melancholic, but sweet. Hanako being able to fulfill some kind of role in her life and keep that connection they have, and Nene still trusting Hanako enough to ask for a wish. Fast forward 20 chapters, and Hanako does grant the wish by killing her best friend, destroying the connections between life and death, and trying to wipe out her memory of everything, including him, again, because at this point we know all too well that this is the result of his deep self-hatred. It's just sad on the both of them. That being said, there's one moment during the severance that really gets to me, and it's after Hanako tries to wipe her memory. It's a small panel at the bottom of the page where after Nene shouts at him, he just stares, and he stares at her with these empty eyes. We know eyes tell a story in TBHK, and so it just reflects this emptiness he has inside of him. The least human he's ever looked. Even right there and then at what he believes to be the end, he's still hiding something. And that is the core of any toxic relationship. Hanako lies a lot. He never expresses how he truly feels except for a few moments of vulnerability, and he takes it into his own hands to do things, disregarding how others feel for what he believes to be the greater good. Even in a romantic sense, he's possessive and jealous, and it was chapter 71 that really got in my head just how Hanako thinks. Hanako's psychology is deeply rooted in the belief that apparitions and humans are fundamentally different, not just in power but in essence. To him, what defines an apparition is the absolute loss of a future. His life and identity as Amane Yuki ended a long time ago, leaving behind only a lonely being bound to a role that he cannot escape. And yet, even after everything he's done to her, he's still met with a desperate request. Please don't go. In the end, we can't help the things we naturally long for, completely shattering any facade he had on and bringing the light back into his eyes. I wish things could have stayed the same. No, that's not right. I wish I could have lived a real life with you. I want to go back to an earlier statement I made in this video and completely change it. If dreams are what keep people alive, then Hanako was never truly dead because Nene was that dream, that hope. And that is what makes this relationship so special. In this dreamlike manga, she's his only escape, the one person who lets him get a glimpse into who he really is. Every moment he dares to dream, to reach for the moon, it's always with her by his side. And it brings about another question. What is it about her that's able to make a 60-year-old traumatized ghost feel human? I haven't spoken much about Nene throughout this video, purely to save her for now. At the start, I liked Nene, but I always felt that she wasn't that interesting compared to the other characters in the series that have a lot more going on. However, as we get further and further into the story, we see more and more that she completely embodies the story's themes. She's able to accept her inevitable circumstances and find the right way to deal with it. And most of all, the fact that Nene keeps reaching out, which sometimes can be a bad thing because it gets into all sorts of fucked up situations. But you know, reading this story, you start to see that there's a real beauty in that, a real strength in constantly being able to love even if it hurts you. And it is a thing that has been proven so powerful that it can cross time and space, and it's because of that she's able to reunite Hanako in one of the best confession scenes I've ever seen. Hanako coming completely clean that he wanted to leave a part of himself with Nene, that he wanted to be the one to save her, that he shouldn't be feeling this way, but he does. You can't help but want the things you naturally long for, in an almost parallel way to Sumire and Hakuba. And this is the beauty of Han and Nene, that even amongst their horrible circumstances and situation, it's their genuine and real love for each other that keeps them together no matter where they are. And you see those beautiful moments constantly throughout the story, keeping you rooting for them even amongst that tragedy. All in all, I think chapter 91 ended a huge part of Hanako's arc. By communicating and opening up, Hanako takes another huge step forward, finally coming to terms and acknowledging his emotions. Both Nene and Hanako are moving forward and learning to cherish what they have together. And then the whole fucking story gets erased. Like, I'm not even joking. None of it fucking happened. Ah! Remember when I said people were questioning what the point of this manga even was? Well, it's because of this. And I don't blame them, because it means that every fucking volume from 1 to 22 that I spent my hard-earned money on, I repeat, did not happen because the entire time that got erased. But you know what? At least in this reality, they're happy. Ko is dead. Ko is dead. Actually, everybody's probably dead at this point. Hanako has become this and this fucking cat. Who the fuck is this cat?
I think it's Tsukasa, by the way. Hanako and him have different eyes based on where their pupils are placed. Hanako in the corner and Tsukasa in the center. The cat being in the center means that it's Tsukasa, but you know, hey, that's just my opinion. I think it's obvious, but it's just my opinion.
And of course, this has led to a lot of mixed opinions. I've even seen some people go as far as to say that the manga has gone downhill, even ruined because of this. And I don't blame them. All the suffering our characters went through, all the suffering we went through, what was it all for? But that being said, I actually have the complete opposite opinion. I fucking love this decision from Ida Iro. I'd even go as far as to say that I think this is perfect, because it feels like this is the last piece of the puzzle when looking at the story as a whole. And it's one moment in chapter 115 that encapsulates what I mean perfectly. It is also a moment that may or may not have made me cry like a baby. After the timeline changes, Nene is naturally very confused, seeing how much everything has changed. Also, shout out to the character development, but most of all, struggling in trying to fill the gaping hole in her heart. Where is Hanako? And in searching, she eventually comes across an old science room and she finds him, but something's different. Nene is looking at an older Hanako, or more specifically, looking into the past at a teacher called Yugi Amane who had long passed on. And this interaction crushed my heart in a way that I'd never really felt before, because it brought about a unique question. How are you meant to feel in this situation? Looking at somebody you love live a fulfilling life without you, should you be happy for them, sad, jealous, angry? And for the first time in the series, Nene is put in the same dilemma as Ko, Saza, and Hanako. Do you let go for their happiness or change things so that they stay by your side? And even though later everything goes to shit and Nene has to change it, it doesn't take away from the value of the choice that she has to make. Is Hanako becoming some sort of demon the answer to that question, or is it simply that no matter what era, he is always doomed to that same loneliness, that same pain? Can Nene and Hanako ever happily be together, or do their circumstances make that impossible? And I know I've done this way too many times in this video to the point that I'm probably going to get cooked, but I promise this is the last time. I think the answer to those questions can be found in one moment in the series that has been squeezing my heart ever since the moment I saw it. In chapter 74, Ko comes across Mitsuba's mother when visiting his grave in hopes of still being able to find a connection with him that crosses the living world, ending up in Mitsuba's home. And once again, it's a moment where you're forcefully brought back down to reality. The pictures, the empty room, the books, it just feels like time refuses to move forward, forcing you to once again see Mitsuba's tragedy. But more than that, it's when the mum talks about her relationship with her son that really made me realize something. Mitsuba and his mum have a really funny / cute dynamic. Mitsuba is this sassy photographer that uses his mum as a model, constantly criticizing her, but she low-key really enjoys it and it's hilarious. But when seeing this dynamic, it makes you realize all the more just how brutal and painful Mitsuba's death must have been for her. On the night of his death, he had forgotten the potatoes for the curry he was making for her birthday, going out to get them, but never coming back home, dying in a traffic accident. Emotionally, that would destroy anyone, but even more than that, it's insinuated that Mitsuba's death was more on the brutal side, and you can see that in the scar on his neck. Just knowing all this, I can't even imagine the horror Mitsuba's mum is going through. It's enough to make anybody give up on the world, and yet she's still able to smile just like she did back then, even being able to enjoy the fact that Mitsuba did have friends, still appreciating learning new things about him long after he passed on. And it's because of this, Ko has this moment of realization. He looks up and simply says the words, "Mitsuba's really dead, isn't he?" Only for his mother to respond, "Yes." And you can see on his face, it looks like he had just woken up from a long dream. This panel hit me so hard for a personal reason. It reminded me so much of something that's really been crushing my heart, and it's my cat Pandy. Pandy is the second of my 3 cats, and honest to God, he is barely even a cat, more like a golden retriever. Like genuinely, this boy would play fetch, bark, and he was also really stupid. However, only 1 year after he came into my life, I got a call that he had passed from a sudden, tragic accident. And you know, like many of you, I'm no stranger to death. I've had friends pass, close family members, and all of the above. But to die so suddenly after so little time, it was something new and I just didn't know how to deal with it. And so I tried my best to forget it, to forget him. It definitely wasn't easy. I'd cry a lot, but after moving all the pictures I had of him and asking my family not to bring him up, etc., I went on with life. But there was always this lingering regret in my heart, and it was when I reread this chapter that I understood why. Somewhere along the way, I thought that because he died so young and quickly, that it meant that our time together never meant anything. And that is just not true whatsoever. We are so much more than our lifespans and how we died, just like the characters in this story. Once more, Toilet Bound Hanako isn't a cautionary tale about how to not end up dead, but a hopeful one about finding value beyond that. Ko and Mitsuba may not have had a strong relationship in the real world, but he found some sort of beauty in his relationship afterwards. His tears while speaking to Nene are proof of how much it meant to him. More than anything, the fact that he continues to face it, carrying all his regret, sorrow and pain, and still choosing not to turn away from Mitsuba says so much. He confronts those emotions constantly, and that alone shows how deeply he cherishes the connection they had. And even if he can't fully embrace it now, I have no doubt that by the end of the story, he will move forward treasuring that memory. Like a lot of you, I am a person that really struggles to be emotionally vulnerable, and I think that's why we relate to characters like Hanako so much. But it's in seeing Ko and Nene constantly look forward, move forward, and in the last few chapters, Hanako even following suit, that I will continue trying to overcome that barrier in me and cherish others. And I will do that with my favorite cat, who is secretly a dog, Pandy, and all of the people I love and will love. And I hope that's what you guys can also take away from the series. And it's because of all this that, as messed up as the situation is right now, the tragic circumstances of Hanako and Nene, I have no doubt that Nene's love will continue pushing past time and space. And no matter what ending Ada has in mind for them, all I know is that they'll definitely find a way to value what they have, and that's all that matters. Now I have talked for way too long about a toilet series, so I will leave you with my favorite quote from the entire manga that summarizes everything I love about the series. Here, where there is no birth or death, the ones with the most power are those who don't know when to give up. As usual, thank you so much for watching this video, and if I sound tired, it's because I am. This video was a lot of fun and also a lot of effort to make. There is also a really good chance that I will not be getting any revenue from this video because I am a stubborn shit and had to use Tiny Light as the intro and outro because I love that song so fucking much. So if you would please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing, it would go a long way. And hey, if you're interested in supporting the channel or extra content / editing tutorials, please feel free to check out the Patreon. I genuinely need all the support I can get. And with that out of the way, I hope you live a long, happy life, my friends.